Welcome back to We Know Scripted TV, where today we know Star Wars Skeleton Crew Season 1, Episode 8, the season finale, The Real Good Guys. My name is Grace, but of course I'm not alone. I'm here with the real good guy. It's Owen. Owen, how you doing?
I'm great, Grace. Happy to talk about this episode. Hopefully, just season finale. Hopefully, not a series finale. I thought this was a fun finish. I thought it was a really enjoyable 8 episodes overall. And yeah, I had a blast watching. I've had a blast talking about it with you, and excited to get into the finale episode here.
Yeah, it feels like they wrapped kind of everything up in a way that I think it's a pretty satisfying finale with lots of doors open to do more if they wanted to. So I would agree that I would kind of hope that they do more, but if they don't renew it, I feel like this is a pretty complete story of Star Wars Skeleton Crew. So
Agreed.
I'm excited to chat through it with you. Well, let's dive in. I mean, we get Jod. I do feel like, not to critique it immediately, we do end on the moment of him like pulling out the lightsaber, and then immediately the first thing he does is put away the lightsaber this
I know.
episode. But that's okay. He's gonna hold them hostage to try and as we talked about, it's not just to get a bunch of the coin out of the off of Ad, it's to basically run the whole thing. He's gonna run
Yep, and
the whole thing. He's gonna go up and meet the
enslave the
supervisor.
populace and just take over and start printing
Yeah,
his own money. Jod
yeah, yeah,
coin.
yeah.
Yeah.
So smart. But of course we will get the rambunctious skeleton crew in defiance of it. And I do think, I mean, I think everything that we were sort of thinking about pretty much all season. I guess I have one notable exception to that, I think. Gets pretty much explained. I think that we
Mhm.
figure out that the supervisor is a droid bot who's just been keeping things going as is. So they go up to meet him. And we get Jod's backstory that he was potentially a young Jedi, or at least could have been a Jedi who gets
Mhm.
trained, but she is hunted down and killed. That's a very familiar story I think we've seen in the Star Wars universe of stories around this time of what happened during the fall of the Republic, and you can understand why he's sort of jaded. And I feel like the episode, I think, does a really good job of setting in Jod's frustrations, Owen, with the fact that all of these kids, while they are like wanderlust adventurers, also have loving parents, and that annoys
Mhm.
Jod greatly.
It does. It does. And not only, yeah, are they a gigantic pain in his ass, yeah, they're part of a loving family that I'm sure he's jealous of in deep down. And yeah, I really enjoyed a lot of what happened. I think you and I had spoke at length about like the droid supervisor. Okay, like it's fine, not insane, but like we'll take
Voice
that.
actor for it, so I'll give them some kudos. It's the wonderful Stephen Fry, who's a lovely British actor. If you don't know him, check him out.
Mhm.
At least they
Mhm.
did well, you know?
That is true. And I saw this being discussed online, and I agree. Like, I appreciate that the supervisor wasn't stupid, and the supervisor
Mhm.
kind of saw through Jod's BS and called him on it within the first minute of that interaction. But I really, really enjoyed his backstory. Like, I'm glad they didn't name a specific Jedi and do some fan service wink to Ahsoka, or I mean, Ahsoka's alive, but you know what I'm saying. Like,
Mhm.
try to weave it, make it more than it needed to be.
I thought it was
Um,
coming. I was just like, and then my Jedi master, like they're dead. It's like, okay, phew. Like we,
oh, yeah.
yeah,
Okay. No, not a
uh-huh,
tie-in, not a
uh-huh.
unneeded ham-fisted thing. But I'm with you on the like early critique. At first, I was a little annoyed in the like the previously on. They cut to Kim telling the kids like, "Call me if you ever need
I
help,"
know,
because we
I
had
know.
speculated about that last week. But it's again, I got to remind myself there are a lot of kids watching this. They're
Yeah,
they might not remember who Kim is,
uh-huh.
and I'm with you. Like when like what was he doing, a salute with his lightsaber when he drew it on all the kids and their
That's right.
parents by the
He is
vault? Like,
intimidation, you know. Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
But I just thought it was funny. They kind of yada yada over it. And I'm curious your take, Grace. Like, did you feel that they were painting the parents to be a little thick skulled and kind of a little goofy, and like, the kids are right and the parents are kind of dumb and adults aren't always right? Like, I felt like it was a touch like Wendell was a little bit too big of a goofball, or Fern's mom was a little bit too naive. Like, I don't know if they hammed it up with the parents being in the wrong to make the kids look better. I don't know if you noticed that or had thoughts on that.
I kind of like it. I think it feels to me incredibly like, Spielbergian, and maybe not Spielberg as much as it is just like the more like down the line 80s and 90s kids content that I watched, where like often the parents just get so yada yada out of the thing, and they're there either as like the threat of being grounded, or like whatever, you have to sneak out or you have to do something. And that I like this mix of sort of them doing that, because I also think that their response is one that like definitely do want like parents to of these kids to have a more like, yes, I believe you mentality. But I almost felt like it's pretty quickly almost like not a I don't believe you. It's like, no, this is what we do to keep ourselves safe. And I do think like if you're watching this as a parent, like I'm not a parent, but I wonder whether I do feel like their behavior is pretty relatable, in the sense that like there's one thing to know that it's the right thing to do, and there's another thing of like, now I'm responsible for another human being, and I'm going to do the things that keep them safe in this way that maybe like feels selfish. But I think in the way that the show ultimately like resolves itself, I think especially with Fern, where Fern gives the line to her mom of like, no matter how bad it got, there's always good people out there, and it's okay to sort of like open ourselves up to the risk of anything could come to Ad-Atten, but like we have to trust in the goodness of people. To me, that's a really great theme that I like in the show. And I do like sort of like having that gesture in those moments come from the innocence of children, I think, right? And like the wisdom that children have, because they're not weighed down by having to have a job and feed their family. I don't mind them being maybe more obtuse than they might like otherwise be. But that's my read.
No, you summed that up beautifully. I think the overarching theme that got explored with Fern there that you just mentioned, that's perfect. And yeah, I think there is like some like purity and innocence and like hopefulness about the kids that I think is kind of the point. And I think you're right. Like I think you can empathize with the parents more when you slow down for a second and remember, like, they got a pretty good thing going on Ad-Atten. They're insulated, they're safe, they've got a stable economy, they all have really nice houses, they're eating, like they've got jobs, like they're safe in their little corner of the universe. So yeah, I could see why it would be a little bit scary to pull the lever to remove the barrier and expose them to the great unknown. Yeah.
Well, two things I think to that, like there's a really great metaphor of like, and I do feel like not to like really like compare to like extreme modern day politics. I don't know this is what they're trying to do, but like there is literally like a barrier. Like there was this thing of like when Trump first got elected, like build the wall. And I do think that like there is this thing that people do feel like that by letting other people come, like what we have is lost. But I think that people who are maybe leaning more left wing feel like there is a beauty to the opening up and like inviting other people in and caring for everybody, not just who has ended up being inside this planet when the barrier went up. And so the actual metaphor of like the barrier having to come down for people to be able to come in, I think I think it's really good. I think it's really strong, and I like that it is the kids who urge the parent. Like you have Fern and Wim holding the lightsaber to try and pull it back from Jod using the Force, but then it's ultimately the parents who do shut down the barrier. Like they're the ones who are implicit in helping sustain the barrier being upped, and they're the ones who ultimately contribute to the actual moment of the barrier coming down. So I like that.
Yeah, very, very well said. You're on one this morning, Grace.
Oh,
I
love it. It's great. Star Wars gets me, I feel like the metaphors could be so of like it's silly space, lightsaber battles, but then you're like, no, it's actually themes about like how we want our society to function,
right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and all the people being like, Star Wars is woke, this and that. It's like it was written about like as a parallel to the Vietnam War. It's been pretty woke and
literally about an empire, like an evil empire. Like it's no more political than like the government systems in which we live under,
Right. So yeah, no, I think that is, I hadn't even thought about that, but yeah, thematically that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's a pretty poignant message in today's day and age. And it was cool, even in episode 1, seeing the, galactic sex worker looking out for the kids. And, it's like, I don't know. I thought it was a really, really wonderful ride. just as like thinking about the rest of the finale, like I
Mhm,
just had a lot of fun with it. Like
mhm.
there was a moment at one point, the meme, like now this is pod racing,
That's right.
like and it's
That's
like
so fun. The
yeah,
bike,
the
that's
bike
so
thing.
Amblin. That's so like ET. That's so like literally. There's a game that I love to play called Kids with Bikes. It's like designed on the fact that like there's all these like Stranger Things. You think about this, like
Yep.
obviously that's not old school, but it's based in that time period of like roaming around the city, like the town on your bike, and like
Mhm.
them having a hover bike chase was excellent. I
Yeah, I
loved it.
loved it. And in my head, I was like, now this is Star Wars.
It's
Like it
so
really
good.
just felt whimsical. It just took me back. And like, in the back of my head, I heard a voice being like, they should be getting blasted right now. Like,
Yeah,
how are they missing? And everyone's fine. But it was wonderful. And then like watching Neil on the gigantic cannon on the roof. And
yeah,
I just thought they all played their parts really well. And it was awesome. Oh, quick sidebar.
yes.
The
Hmm.
scene where Wendell's fingers are getting pulled back by Jod with the
Yeah,
force, that made me
yeah,
squirm.
yeah.
That was
That's pretty
rough.
rough.
That
Yeah,
was rough. I was like, "Ooh." Yeah.
we'll come back to Jod, I think, because I wanna end where sort of he ends, because I think it's a really interesting note to discuss of like the last moment of Jod we see. But between then, we basically get he sends them all sort of home, and they're going to be under droid supervision. I just thought
Mhm.
the framing of this episode, again, there's a thing where I think that the show did a really good job ending the arc of the season of the kids like accidentally going to space, having to figure out how to get back, coming back, everything that happened here. But then within this episode, I think it's also framed structurally very well, where you sort of have them all going back to their homes, where they're going to be under droid supervision. He takes Fern up to see the supervisor because he wants Farah to be there, as well. And so then you have basically the separation of all the kids, where then they're all going to play their own. You're going to have their own role to play, and then eventually, sort of like each have a thing they're doing. Where like KB is obviously going to be the one. I love the moment of they get into the ship, and Wendell's like, "You guys know how to ride a like drive
Mhm.
a pirate ship?" And she's like, "Yeah, Dad." And they go. And Neil's on the hover with on the hover bikes at one point. So like
Mhm.
all of the ways, the functions to get them to do all of the things felt very fun. This is almost like you could see this as basically like a self-contained movie.
Mhm.
If you
100%.
could like stretch this out longer, like this is a great movie thing where they're all doing their own stuff. They're all using their skills that they're good at to like
Mhm.
get the
And the
job done to fight
payoff.
off the pirates. Yeah.
Yeah, and the payoff from the previous episodes,
Right.
with Neil, who had learned from the girl on the other planet whose name Hella
Uh-huh. Yeah, 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 the outside, yeah. Mhm.
but yeah, I just thought it was a really nice kind of bow on everything, and it was just fun. It was sweet, and yeah, I there were moments where, as we discussed earlier, the parents did seem a little overly obtuse, but I also did really enjoy it where the kids are like proving their mettle, right? And the kids are proving that they're capable and they've survived this adventure not necessarily just by luck, but because they've like been present and learned and been open to the experience. And yeah, I thought it was great. And I think the whole bit with the culmination in the tower, I thought was very well done. You and I had discussed, just seeing some of the comments online, but like Jude Law, just such a powerful performance, and the
Mhm.
the conflicted nature. You get his motivation from his Order 66 backstory. Like for me at least, I totally understood where he was coming from, why he's looking for this like stability in his life, and you could see he was conflicted. Like he is, yes, he's threatening children with a lightsaber, but you can tell he doesn't want to. Like he just wants. He just almost feels like exasperated that it's not going to plan, and he just wants it. He's just like, please, like I don't want to do any of this. I don't want to hurt anyone. And I just thought the performance and the kind of climax of the episode and of kind of the season was really well done.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he is. It makes a lot of sense that he's somebody who he sees the kids for a long time as a utility to get what he wants, and that he's basically put them in a position of their like kind of spoiled little brats who like have had everything. They've been safeguarded
Meddling
from the world.
kids.
Yeah, they are meddling kids, and I mean, he does seem like I think genuinely sad when like KB's ship goes down that we'll learn like does get landed by 33. And I think we're probably, I don't know, in my opinion, we're more in the Dwight hopefulness of last week's pod, where he did not want the like sort of heroic turn for Jod. I feel like we never really get that. I think that the monologue of what happened to him does let us at least feel like he's not so much a villain as sort of a tragic, protagonist of the show, or maybe antagonist, maybe an I don't even know if anti-hero. He definitely, I think, within the course of this show, certainly still feels like the villain, like the thing that they have to beat. He does sort of take that turn at the end, and this is who they have to overcome, is his plan to control it. As the Mint, he's the one who sets the pirate crew on it, and it's the kids trying to do everything they can to stop him, get a message out to the New Republic, and get Kim to come. I guess we could talk about this now. There's this moment where it's over. Like he's looking out the window and he realizes like, oh, my plan has failed. The New Republic is beating my pirates. I'm done. And Wim and the rest of them go because they're going to go to KB. And Wim calls out and he calls for Jod to come. And Jod kind of just gives him a little smirk, like, no, I'm not like. And I feel like this is what Dwight wanted, was not this like, all right, now I'm part of your team and let me help you. He's fully bad the whole time. But there's also not a moment where they like arrest him or he dies, and he's kind of, I feel like my notion for this is like, this is a perfect way to wrap up the arc of this season while also leaving it totally open for Jod to return if they did a season 2. But what do you make of this, like the last moment of Jod looking out the window sort of somberly?
Yeah, no, I loved it. And I was texting Dwight right after and saying, like, they did what you wanted. They kept him a villain. They didn't have this redemption. And I thought it was very satisfying. And like you were saying, it's like, how do you label him? Like, is he the villain, or do you see his motivations? Like, what is it? But yeah, I mean, there was ample opportunity for him to use the Force to grab the lightsaber and kill everyone. But that's not him. Like, he didn't want to do that, but he knew he had been beat. But I completely agree with you. I'm glad he didn't get in the elevator and say, okay, kids, let's make sure KB's okay. But I thought it was poignant. I thought it was really well done. And I can't commend Jude Law enough on the performance. I think there were a lot of layers in the emotion behind it. And I think you're exactly right that they're setting it up to where Jod and Jude Law can be a part of the Star Wars universe, and because he's a great character. Like, I really think there's a lot more to explore there, and have him serve as a foil and as like this likable antagonist, but to whom you can understand his motivations and understand it's not a pure evil, just random specter of badness like a Snoke or the Emperor or whatever. So I was very satisfied with how they left him off. And at first I was a little concerned that like the pirate ship was going to crash into the tower and there was going to have some big explosion or something. But I kind of like the open-ended nature to where you could easily see him sneaking out of it and talking his way out of it, and imagining him off on some other adventure trying to find his next big score.
Yeah, so I mean, between that, I feel like that really leaves it open that he could come back for Star Wars Skeleton Crew, or obviously he could show up in. I think that there's sort of two properties where like there's a very small chance he could show up in the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, because it would be at the same time. The other option is that I don't know that it's started. I don't believe it's been like it's even close to being in production, but Dave Filoni is going to be doing a movie supposedly. I feel like the Star Wars plans change all the time, where it's like Taika Waititi is going to be doing a movie. It's like, is that actually really happening? I don't know if that's happening. But Filoni supposedly is doing a film that is supposed to be basically combining a lot of the Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, Star Wars Skeleton Crew would certainly fit into that as well, and Ahsoka, I believe, as well. Where that to me feels like if you're going to do something that mixes, like, specifically Ahsoka, a character who was sort of has like left the Jedi Order at some point, right? Like all of the stuff there feels like there's so much potential for a Jod to show up,
to interact with,
in that.
Agree.
And then the other piece of this, of the ending, that I think certainly you could see, I don't know how ready they would be to do this and how much time you'd have to do, but it would not take that much time for Wim to be sort of a young adult who
Mhm.
is then a Jedi in training by the time the Jedi program like is back up and running. And that last moment of him watching the TIE fighters like
Mhm.
go away to me felt very much like this kid will be will this kid be a Jedi?
Mhm.
So
Or
I
is he the next like Poe Dameron, like
100%.
pilot, X-wing star, Top Gun kind of thing? But yeah, the just the childlike wonder in that last shot. You're like, oh, okay. Like he found his adventure, he found his calling, he knows what he wants to do. Screw the exam. Like he wants to be out in the stars, flying a ship, doing cool stuff. Yeah, I would love to see more of these characters because I really think they did a nice job. But I'm with you. I think Ahsoka could be a really good kind of connecting point with Jod, and certainly not in a like Ahsoka takes Jod on as her Padawan type of thing.
Mhm.
Like as kind of a similarly damaged person, like force sensitive person who's had, you know, Ahsoka obviously much longer experience with the Jedi, but like I feel like they could relate on that level and like almost the disenchantment with the force and the universe at large and just all these factors at play. And I feel like they're probably a similar age as well, so that could create for some interesting interplay between the two. But I just the combination of everything, it does, like, it's giving Star Wars Avengers a little bit, and
Uh,
I'm
mhm.
like a touch conflicted on how I feel about that, just because I think we've discussed this in earlier episodes, but part of me is a little exhausted by Marvel and by Disney in general, like making us watch so much content to understand the next movie. Or even right before we started recording, we were talking about Severance and how it had
Mhm.
been 3 years and
Mhm.
how you need to rewatch in order to fully appreciate season two, which I'm willing to do. But just like, I don't know. I just feel like the crossovers and the super teams and everything coming together can be satisfying, but it's also like I think a slippery slope in terms of like how into the weeds it can get. But
Yeah,
um
I mean, I think we could say to me, I think like and actually Star Wars, I will hope has learned the lesson of what caused their like sequel trilogy to become the mess that it was and to basically have Disney and Lucasfilms to bow out of basically doing movies until they're going to come back with The Mandalorian and Grogu, which is a consistency of vision, sort
mhm,
of a spearheading somebody centrally in charge of the story that they're trying to tell. So much of what I think got bungled over the Star Wars sequels, and it basically in my mind, I know that some people have conflicting thoughts on the second sequel movie, but basically once you go into the third movie and it's retconning everything that happened before it,
mhm,
even if you don't agree with the direction now feels like we're completely lost and off the map. And so I do feel like partially, I think what happened with Marvel is a combination of there being too much and then not feeling like everything was worth watching, but then feeling like you had to watch everything to be able to do it. Like in my estimation, I am pretty excited by the idea of sort of the television show um content that is set in the New Republic leading into some like a series maybe of films that connects a lot of these dots, mostly because I think for the most part the floor on the content that we've gotten has been pretty strong. I would argue. And so if you're only talking about New Republic content, you're basically talking about Mando, Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka, and Skeleton Crew.
mhm,
Book of Boba Fett is probably the weakest of the whole thing, in my opinion. I mean, I guess that some people might quibble about um, Ahsoka or not. But if you're thinking about those properties, I feel like those have been where they found a lot of success
mhm,
and can leverage those into something that's new and exciting. And in my world, like take the best of all of those things, jam them into a Star Wars movie. I'm pretty excited on day one to go. I think that part of where the shows have struggled a little bit is you had the Acolyte too, which feels so consistent, like so. I liked actually Acolyte. I definitely can understand why people had frustrations with it. That feels so constricted by everything they wanted to do elsewhere. And I also think the benefit of the era that we're in terms of the New Republic, I guess there is still then the sequel trilogies. So they are a little bit hampered by the fact that like they can only change so much before the movies
mhm,
um
mhm.
canon comes into play. But that's to me why I'm a little bit more optimistic on this than like if we're like trying to think about how we get Ewan McGregor in another Star Wars movie.
Right.
Like to me, that what else can we do there?
Yeah, yeah, and I think they've done a good job with the New Republics, like setting the table with like the young Mon Mothma and the kind of
Hmm.
political side of it. Like I'm rewatching Andor right now as well, and
Hmm. Coming back this year.
it's coming back this year, and it is excellent. And so I think they are setting the table nicely. But I don't mean to be a hater on the whole like cinematic universes kind of as a concept, but I do think Star Wars is executing it in a more enjoyable way for me than Marvel is a little bit, just because there's a little less to do, and it's just I do feel like there are these kind of distinctive periods that allow for a little more flexibility, and not like you were saying, not necessarily like retconning stuff, but having some flexibility within the canon to explore some periods a bit more than the original movies did. So yeah, I'm excited. I was just pulling up, also just looking at what kind of things are upcoming with Star Wars. So they're doing an untitled New Jedi Order film by Shermeen Obaid Chinoy,
Hmm.
untitled Dawn of the Jedi film by James Mangold, and then an untitled New Republic film by Dave Filoni. So that'll be kind of what we were discussing, set in this period. Um,
Yeah,
and then
that
the new,
new Jedi Order one, that's so like 15 years after the sequel movies, so
Mhm.
different time, right? So and then the Mangold one I think was going to be did they announce what their Dawn of the Jedi, so that's
Dawn
the
of the Jedi.
beginning.
Yeah.
That's like before. So I do feel like there is a bunch of that I do remember them doing this at one of the, whether it was Comic-Con or something like that, where they sort of announced like these projects led by particular people that would all happen at sort of different times in the Star Wars uh in the timeline. So yeah. Hmm.
And I fuck with James Mangold. I loved 310 to Yuma. I loved Logan. So I feel
Yeah.
like him doing Star Wars, that is titillating.
Yeah.
Um,
Um I the other thing that I think is really effective, and I think actually, like, for as much as I liked Skeleton, or sorry, the Acolyte, I do think that they did a thing at the end of that season that sort of made me wince in a way that this episode of Skeleton Crew did not do, which is at the end of the Acolyte. Spoilers if you haven't watched the Acolyte, but we're going to assume you have. We get a glimpse that Yoda is going, like, is a part, would be a part of that show should it come forward. We get the like notion that the Jedi Order, Yoda is there, and someone goes to meet him, and we're gonna, okay, Yoda's in this show now. And to me, I feel like the instinct to not do any of that with Star Wars Skeleton Crew, to not end exactly what we're talking about, to end on the moment of Jod being like, and my Jedi Master who was killed, and then it's like her name was Ahsoka. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but like, like there was no instinct to say, and this is how it's connected. I feel like is sort of the
mhm,
perfect thing that I would I feel much better about like watching a show and knowing that, like, okay, I can be satisfied with the complete story of this thing. And then
mhm.
if I get a hint that, like, oh, it looks like Jod's going to be in Mandalorian and Grogu, like, how fun. I watched that show and I have it. And also I could recommend it to people saying, you could go watch Star Wars Skeleton Crew and it's a complete story, and you're not going to feel like you're watching the whole thing to be bogged down with like, what's the lore I'm learning about
Correct.
why
Yeah.
this matters. So I feel like the episode, the season as a whole, I feel like it's restraint to not do the like, how is it connected thing, to me,
Yep.
enhances the fact that it could then be connected to things, because it stands on its own either
Yep.
way. So I can either get the standalone thing or it will end up being connected, and that's kind of fun.
It'll be a nice, pleasant surprise if Jod turns up another time. And yeah, I'm 100% with you on that. And I think that's been a lot of the reaction of people online talking about it, is like, it's just like, it's a fun ride. It's a great Star Wars story. It can be what it is, and you don't need to, it's very accessible. Kids would love it. Like, I don't know. I think it just hit every note it was trying to hit. Like thinking back to when I saw the trailer, when you had reached out, I hadn't even seen the trailer, and you're like, "Hey, are
Mhm.
you a Star Wars person? Do you want to maybe podcast about this?" And then I watched it, and I was like, "Oh my god, this looks so fun!" Like, it really just felt like that Goonies coming of age, just really excellent kind of stuff I'm a sucker for, and I think
Mhm.
it was immensely successful at all of it, and it was awesome.
So yeah, I want to go back to the supervisor. So as I mentioned, it's voiced by Stephen Fry. I do feel like maybe my other quip is like, he does die pretty quickly. Literally gets
Yeah.
in the console piece and dies, and all the power and all the droids are no longer under his control. That's fine. I did get like, this show has been so good at paying homage to other stories and other pop culture media, this to me feels about as Wizard of Ozzy as we can get, of like
Yeah.
behind the curtain and it's just literally a robot. I will say, I think that the one mystery that I think we never really explore is Tak Rennet and how the ship got on Adan in the first place. Am I right in remembering that we basically do not get an answer to that question? And I'm wondering whether that's I'm not like, it doesn't fit quite in the story, but we needed Tak Rennet. But there's a whole moment where we get like a Tak Rennet hologram, and they purposely don't show us his face. That I'm like, wow, it was really silly that we never
I'm
get
with you.
the answer on who Tak Rennet is and why he can, like, I mean, he can just be a pirate who came and like wanted to come and then crashed and he literally died, but we never get confirmation on that. And is that like we picked up on the wrong mysteries? We were like, our radar sensor was going off at the wrong time, or is that a miss by the show to have like made us think that we were probably going to get the answer?
That's a good question. I'm not like deeply upset that we never got that answer, and maybe it's kind of like a little bit of a red herring, like just to keep our wheels turning as the season was progressing. But yeah, it is a little unsatisfying that never came to fruition. But I'm not like, I think something you said a second ago, like it not necessarily fitting in with the conclusion. Like I think it might have been a little too much to try to make it work. Like it would have taken a little more finagling than would have been satisfying to be like, yes, the supervisor is an AI droid and Jod, has this, run in with a Jedi in the past. And oh, by the way, Tak Rennet was the former supervisor who stole a ship and blah, 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 blah. Like, I think that might have been just a little too much, but yeah, I think it was like mildly dissatisfying, but I'm not upset necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly get the sense that like sometimes like we start picking apart things, and I can imagine the like horror on the like writers and the thing of the show being like, no, we're not doing anything with that. Like it's nothing.
Yeah.
Like why did you not have his face in the hologram? It's like that was just an aesthetic choice that we liked more than it was like supposed to be anything meaningful. So, I guess we got his whole pirate layer, and I guess the idea that if they at any point want us to continue to think maybe the supervisor is Tak Rennet, you can't have a moment, you don't want to reveal that it's obviously not Tak Rennet, and that he's dead or somebody else or couldn't possibly be there, and then have to shoehorn in an answer to that in the finale that feels unsatisfying, and it just gets it's left on the cutting room floor. I think that's totally fair. And the other thing too is like, I think that this is a thing I always feel like when we're talking about things right now, we have a full season. I think as a whole, I'm really satisfied with how this whole season went. This is a thing of like, if we do a whole season 2 and we dive into Tak Rennet, suddenly all my critiques about why we didn't learn more about Tak Rennet in season 1 don't matter at all, because in season 2 we might get the answer. So if the show comes back, there's certainly a way to say like, oh no, it couldn't have been Tak Rennet because we then learn Tak Rennet is somewhere else under a different pirate name, etc., etc. So
yeah, I think it's one of those things that is like minor enough that it's not the end of the world that they didn't address it in season 1, but it does leave them room to work with if there is a season 2, and that could be a new exploration. I liked the theory some people were having. I think we talked about this last week, where the rat is somehow more sentient than we thought. But yeah, I guess that remains to be seen. Maybe we'll never know, but it won't keep me up at night necessarily. But
okay,
yeah, I laughed hard at the concept of the writer's room kind of having like a oh shoot kind of moment around that. That's funny.
Yeah, it's like, no, we didn't expect that. We didn't expect them to think about that. Do you have an MVP of the season? I feel like there's a few you could put on the board. I feel like like my obvious one, I think, is like, as much as I do love Neil, and I think you either can go the skeleton crew, and that's basically the kids as a collective, versus Jod being sort of the MVP. I think that like if you're trying to go individual character, I don't think anybody beats out Jod.
I agree.
If you round all the kids up as one collective group, they maybe come close to being the
maybe
MVP of the show.
My brain is going to like superlatives, like paper plate awards, high school yearbook kind of thing. Like Jod is the MVP, star of the show. Jude Law killed it. I mean, so much depth, so much range of emotion. Neil obviously gets cutest, like incredible, beloved. Like,
his little twin brothers when the ships are coming in. They're all, oh, so cute, so cute.
Good. Fern is like most likely to be president or something like that. Like I think natural leadership qualities like really stood out in kind of a growth, and I loved her vulnerability. KB, I feels like gets like the unsung hero, like glue guy, like heart of the team kind of role there.
Mm.
Um, and then Wim, what is Wim? I think Wim is like, I don't know if he's a class clown or like,
I mean,
I don't
most likely to
know,
be a Jedi.
most likely to
Yeah.
be a Jedi, most
Yeah.
likely to
Yeah.
be a fighter pilot or something,
Yeah.
but or just like most. I don't know. There was some like I think Wim is kind of like the emotional grounding of the show, and like he is the embodiment of like that childlike wonder and whimsy and like head in the clouds kind of thing. But yeah, I think they all as a team all worked together really well, and I thought the kid actors were great. And yeah, but no, I you can't say. I mean, Jod was just so good. Jude Law was so good. I think he is the MVP.
Oh, 33 might be my favorite sentient like speaking droid in a while. I'm trying to think
Mhm.
through. Like I love BB-8 and I love R2D2, but they always feel like different droids than
Yes.
33. So I'm just gonna cheat and categorize them as different. And 33 is one of the better
Mhm.
full up talk like speaks common, you know. Is that what this? I can't remember. That's the D&D
Basic,
term.
I think, is what they call
Basic,
it. Mhm.
a talking droid in a while, I think. So I think
Yeah.
33
I
take the
loved
cake.
I loved K2SO
Okay,
from
yeah.
Rogue One. But yeah, no, 33 I thought was great. I loved like even just like the physical. I don't know if physical comedy is the right word, but just like the physicality of him and how they
A
were able to
pirate
like
robot is very fun.
pirate.
I didn't know I needed.
Yeah.
Mhm.
There's a lot to work with there, and like in the fight scenes, he was like like so menacing and crazy, and then like the age shows with some of the stuttering and this and that. I don't know. I thought it was a really well designed character.
Yeah. Um, as we're talking, it does seem like potentially we did get an answer to what happened to Tack during the show. Apparently, uh, if you go back in episode 5, uh 33 says Tack was killed by a concubine with a dagger, and in episode 3 Jod takes a dagger out of a skeleton to
Mm,
use, and people put that together that
that
would
that is
that would
tact.
that would mean that's Tack. And then the whole thing of like hiding his face in the hologram is just basically to like, if you're not paying close enough attention, you might be theorizing like we are that he was going to be the supervisor and he's not. So I think we get the answer while also keeping things open for us as
Hmm.
we were watching the show. So I think that that's fine.
Hmm.
Um, all right, it seems like yeah, but the next things on the Star Wars agenda are Andor and then the Mandu.
The
That's how
Mando.
you put Mando and Grogu together into one word. But we have the movie, The Mandalorian and Grogu, which there did seem to be some rumors around floating online about the potential plot of that movie that I don't
Oh,
dive deeper into it, but there does seem to be some insight there. And then obviously Andor season 2, which Andor is one of the best shows on television, not just best Star Wars television shows. So very excited for Andor to be returning later this year.
completely agree. Completely agree. I'm pumped. I'm rewatching season one. It's so good. It's just like really well done. I mean, Rogue One was such a, I don't know if pleasant surprise is the right word, but it has stood the test of time. It's one of my favorite pieces of Star Wars media, period.
Mhm.
And the fact that they were able to expand that time period, expand the character, make such a compelling story, I just 10 out of 10 for Andor.
Yeah, I do feel like the themes you were talking about earlier about like what kind of world you want to live in is like it's like turned up to 11 in terms of like real gritty actual adults having to face the consequences of like trying to overthrow a fascist government in Andor, and it completely hits the spot for me. So I'm very excited for Andor to be returning this year. I'm Mando is basically what like ignited some of my love for modern day Star Wars. So
Hmm.
Mandalorian season 3 is what it is. Maybe diverge from being what was in season 1, but a full length movie. I'm very excited for that. So, is there any
My
other
hopes are
notes
high.
on Star Wars Skeleton Crew, Owen, before we
No,
fly off
I'm
into
really
space?
glad we got to talk about it. I think it was a really fun overall show. I think it'll age really well. I think this will be a show that's very satisfying to watch on a binge, and like, down the road one day, hopefully when I have kids, like this can be a great like almost entry point into Star Wars, or not even entry point, but just like a really satisfying, fun story arc that is a bit more self-contained. And I think it was really well done. I had high hopes going in, as we discussed in episode 1. I'm a sucker for coming of age stuff, and I really think it just hit all the emotional notes that it was trying to, and the performances were great. The kids didn't feel like, caricature kid characters. And yeah, I thought it was a fun ride, and I love talking about it with you.
Very much the same. Appreciate people who listened in all along the way. And we'll see if you and I return to talk about more Star Wars in the future. Only time will tell. But until I get anything else to plug, do you want to promote anything else, Owen?
Not a whole lot. I'm just, here and there on RHAP. I'm sure I'll make an appearance during Survivor 48. Shout out to our friend Dwight Moore, who joined last week. You can watch his Blood on the Clock Tower streams. That's become one of my favorite pastimes, playing Clock Tower. So yeah, check out his stream. I'm usually on there most Saturdays. And yeah, you can follow me on Instagram if you want, The Young Knight.
So we wrapped up Silo coverage that aired its season 2 finale. There is on the network, not with me exclusively, but with Josh and the Doctors, Severance coverage. Severance has returned on Apple TV Plus, and then Tara and I talking to tastemakers each week, telling you what you should watch. We'll probably do some spoilery Severance talk at the end of each of those podcasts, because it's one of the best shows on television. So make sure you're subscribed to the We Know Scripted TV feed. Thanks so much for listening to Owen and I chat about Star Wars, and until we see you, may the Force be with you.
May the Force be with you.